There is a particular kind of ghost that haunts our culture. It's the ghost of the impossibly beautiful girl, the one whose face launched 1,000 fantasies, but who could never find peace within her own skin. It's a story we think we know, a tragic archetype played out time and again under the harsh glare of the public eye. But some of these stories are buried deeper, deemed too uncomfortable, too raw, or too connected to a world we pretend not to see. This is one of those stories. It's the story of a young woman who was given a face that the world considered perfect, a California dream of blonde hair and blue eyes. That face made her a queen in a hidden billion-dollar kingdom. To millions, she was known simply as Savannah, a name whispered in private, a fantasy of beauty and desire. But the name on her birth certificate was Shannon Wilsey, and Shannon was trapped by Savannah's reflection, chained to an image of perfection she felt she could never uphold. Her story ends with a terrifying finality at the age of 23, when a minor car accident left a small scar on her face, a wound that to her shattered psyche was a mortal blow. This is not just a story about a tragic death. It's a devastating exploration of beauty as a curse and the search for a self-worth that can't be found in a mirror. To understand the forces that shaped and ultimately shattered Shannon Wilsey, you must transport yourself to the cultural crucible of Southern California in the late 1980s and early 1990s. This was the zenith of the image is everything era. The sober realism of the 70s had given way to the hyper-colorized, glossy excess of the 80s, a culture largely defined by MTV, the glam metal scene on the Sunset Strip, and a fervent belief in the power of appearance. It was a time when success was measured in fast cars, big hair, and brand names, a world where the surface was often mistaken for the substance. Shannon grew up in the heart of this ideology in Mission Viejo, Orange County. Mission Viejo wasn't just a suburb, it was a concept. As one of America's first and largest master plan communities, it was an experiment in creating a perfect, self-contained world. The lawns were uniformly green, the houses were variations on a theme, and the streets were engineered for safety and tranquility. It was an environment designed to insulate its residents from the chaos of the outside world. But for a teenager with dreams bigger than a cul-de-sac, this manufactured perfection could feel like a beautiful gilded cage, breeding a powerful desire for the real, messy, and glamorous world that lay just an hour's drive away in Los Angeles. Simultaneously, a technological revolution was fundamentally changing the entertainment landscape. The video cassette recorder, the VCR, had become a ubiquitous household appliance. This created an explosion in the home video market, a voracious, unregulated demand for new content to fill the shelves of stores like Blockbuster. This revolution had its most profound impact on the adult film industry. It moved the industry out of seedy, back-alley movie theaters and into the privacy of suburban living rooms. This shift created a new paradigm and a new kind of star. The porn chic of the 70s gave way to the video vixen of the 80s and 90s. The ideal was no longer the worldly, European sophisticate, but the relatable, all-American girl next door. The industry began to mint its own celebrities with fan clubs, merchandise, and six-figure contracts. It was a parallel Hollywood, a shadow entertainment industry that offered a seductive and deceptively rapid path to fame and fortune. For a beautiful girl from Mission Viejo, whose Hollywood dreams were stalling, this shadow world was casting a powerful and alluring spell. Shannon Michelle Wilsey was born on October 9, 1970, into a world that seemed to promise her everything. Raised in the pristine suburbs of Mission Viejo, she was, by all accounts, a quintessential California girl. She had blonde hair, sparkling blue eyes, and a radiant smile that could light up a room. From her earliest years, her ambitions were not focused on her picture-perfect hometown, but on the sprawling, mythic metropolis to the north, Los Angeles. She harbored a single powerful dream. She was going to be a movie star. This was not a passing phase. As a teenager, she pursued this goal with fierce determination. She would make the regular pilgrimage from the quiet of Orange County into the chaos of LA, navigating the freeways and the daunting audition circuit. She was chasing any opportunity to get in front of a camera. She managed to land a few roles that kind of blink, and you'll miss it parts that are the bread and butter of aspiring actors. She appeared as an extra or in bit parts in low-budget teen movies and B-grade horror flicks, but the significant breakthrough role she yearned for never materialized. The reality of Hollywood was a harsh one. She was one of literally tens of thousands of beautiful young women competing for the same limited number of roles. The constant rejection was brutal, a steady erosion of the confidence she had carried with her from her hometown. The dream was beginning to feel like a dead end. She was running out of time, money, and hope. It was in this state of disillusionment and quiet desperation that a different, more accessible door opened. Through a friend in the industry, Shannon was introduced to the world of adult entertainment. It was a world she had never considered, but it presented a compelling, if dangerous, proposition. In Hollywood, her beauty was an asset, but it wasn't enough. In the adult world, her beauty was everything. It was the key that could unlock the door not just to work, but to stardom. Here, she wouldn't be just another pretty face in the background. She could be the main event. After a period of hesitation, she made the fateful decision. In 1990, at the age of 19, Shannon Wilsey ceased to be, and Savannah was born. The name she chose for her on-screen persona was deeply telling. It was not a name meant to be overtly sexual or exotic. She named herself after the 1982 family film, Savannah Smiles, a sweet, sentimental story about an adorable runaway little girl who charms two escaped convicts. This choice was a poignant glimpse into her psyche, a desire to wrap the harsh reality of her new profession in a name that evoked a lost innocence, a childlike sweetness that she perhaps felt she was sacrificing. Her impact was immediate and explosive. Savannah was not just another performer, she was a phenomenon. Her all-American good looks, combined with a natural, uninhibited presence on camera, made her an instant favorite. She perfectly embodied the girl-next-door fantasy that was so popular in the video era. Within a year, she was one of the most famous and sought-after stars in the industry. She signed a highly lucrative, exclusive contract with Vivid Entertainment, the MGM of the adult world, which paid her a handsome six-figure salary and officially crowned her as industry royalty. The girl from Mission Viejo, who couldn't get a call back in Hollywood, was now a queen in a hidden but immensely profitable kingdom. For a few brilliant, chaotic years, Savannah lived a life that, from the outside, looked like the dream she had always chased. She traded her suburban roots for the fast lane of Los Angeles nightlife. She drove a brand new Corvette, lived in a trendy apartment, and became a fixture on the hedonistic Sunset Strip rock and roll scene. Her fame within the adult world gave her access to the mainstream celebrity circles she had once admired from afar. She became known for dating a string of high-profile rock stars and actors, including Vince Neil of Motley Crue, Greg Allman of the Allman Brothers Band, comedian Pauly Shore, and rock icon Billy Idol. These relationships weren't just personal dalliances, they were a form of validation. They blurred the lines between her world and theirs, giving her a taste of the legitimate celebrity she had always craved. She appeared in music videos and was a regular topic in the rock and roll gossip rags. She had, in a way, made it, but the foundation of this glittering life was dangerously unstable. The money, while plentiful, seemed to evaporate as quickly as it came in. She was a lavish spender, pouring her income into the expensive props of a celebrity lifestyle: cars, designer clothes, and nonstop parties. Friends and colleagues reported that despite her high earnings, she was perpetually in debt, constantly borrowing money to maintain the facade. The party lifestyle also came with a darker side. She fell deep into the drug culture of the rock scene, developing a significant addiction to cocaine. The drugs were initially a part of the party, but they soon became a necessary crutch, a way to cope with the mounting pressures and her own deep-seated insecurities. Her behavior grew erratic. On set, the superstar performer gained a reputation for being notoriously difficult. She would often arrive hours late for shoots if she showed up at all. Her moods were volatile, swinging from exuberant to sullen and withdrawn. Some dismissed it as the entitled behavior of a diva, but those closer to her recognized the signs of a person in deep emotional distress. The confident sexual goddess Savannah was a carefully constructed mask, and the young woman behind it, Shannon Wilsey, was starting to crumble. At the core of Shannon's turmoil was a devastatingly fragile sense of self. Her identity, her self-worth, and her entire value as a person had become inextricably linked with her physical appearance. In her mind, she was not loved for who she was, but for what she looked like. This belief fostered a desperate, all-consuming obsession with maintaining her perfect image. She was terrified of the natural process of aging. In her early 20s, she was already fixated on the fear of losing her looks. This fear drove her to undergo multiple cosmetic surgeries. She had breast augmentation surgery and later a rhinoplasty, constantly tinkering with her appearance in a futile quest for an impossible standard of perfection. Each surgery was an attempt to fortify the facade, to protect her only perceived asset from the ravages of time. Her beauty had ceased to be a gift. It had become a prison, and she was both its inmate and its warden. As the early 1990s progressed, the pressures intensified from all sides. The adult industry, which had celebrated her, is also notoriously ruthless. A constant influx of new, younger faces meant that no one stayed on top forever. Her drug use and unreliability had strained her professional relationships, and her lucrative contract with Vivid was eventually terminated. Her high-profile romances ended, as they often do, leaving her feeling used and more isolated than ever. The entire fantasy life she had so carefully constructed was beginning to disintegrate, and Shannon was in a terrifying free fall, with nothing and no one to break her fall. The symbolic collapse of her life became brutally literal in the pre-dawn hours of July 11th, 1994. Shannon was behind the wheel of her white Corvette, driving home with a male friend after what was reportedly another night of heavy partying. As she drove through the San Fernando Valley, she lost control of the vehicle. The car swerved off the road and plowed through a fence before coming to a stop. Her friend sustained only minor injuries. Shannon's were more severe. The force of the impact threw her forward, her face striking the steering wheel with violent force. In the chaotic aftermath of the crash, the extent of her injuries became clear. She had a broken nose and, more devastatingly in her mind, a series of deep cuts and lacerations across her face. To anyone else, these would have been painful but ultimately treatable injuries. For Shannon Wilsey, whose entire sense of self was built on the foundation of a flawless face, it was a world-ending catastrophe. At the hospital, her reaction was not one of relief at having survived, but of sheer terror. She was hysterical, obsessed not with her health, but with the potential for permanent scarring. The very thing she had feared most, the loss of her beauty, felt like it was happening in the most sudden and violent way imaginable. After being treated and released, she returned to her apartment, but she was not the same. The physical pain was eclipsed by an overwhelming wave of psychological agony. She was convinced her life was over. The career she had built, the persona she had created, were all dependent on her face, and in her mind, that face was now ruined. Over the next few hours, she descended into a vortex of despair. She made a series of frantic and heartbreaking phone calls. She spoke with her manager, weeping and lamenting her fate, convinced she was now damaged goods. The most detailed account of her final hours comes from her close friend and fellow performer, Jana Fine. Fine would later recount their last tragic conversation. Shannon was inconsolable, sobbing into the phone. "Nobody's going to want to look at me now," she repeated over and over. "My face is ruined." Fine pleaded with her, trying to reassure her that the scars would heal, that she was still beautiful, that she was loved. She promised to come over as soon as she could, but Shannon seemed beyond the reach of comfort. She was lost in a reality where a single scar had erased her entire worth. Sometime after that phone call, Shannon Wilsey, alone in her apartment, made a final, irreversible decision. She took the .45 caliber handgun she owned, walked into her bedroom, and ended her own life. A friend, arriving later that day to check on her, discovered the tragic scene. Shannon Michelle Wilsey, the superstar known as Savannah, was dead. She was 23 years old. The deepest tragedy of this story lies in the vast, unbridgeable chasm between the persona and the person. Savannah was a construct of pure confidence, a fantasy of uninhibited sexuality and power. Shannon Wilsey was the ghost in that machine, a sensitive, insecure, and deeply lonely young woman who craved little more than love and a stable sense of self. The name Savannah Smiles remains the most poignant clue to her inner world. It was a name that reached for innocence, a soft-focused fantasy to overlay a harsh-edged reality. It suggests a part of her that never wanted to grow up, a part that was still the little girl from the suburbs who dreamed of a fairy tale version of Hollywood stardom. Her financial struggles offer another profound insight. The inability to hold onto the vast sums of money she earned speaks to a desperate, magical thinking. It was as if by surrounding herself with the external trappings of success, the sports car, the designer clothes, the endless parties, she could convince herself and the world that she was happy and valuable. It was a frantic and ultimately failed attempt to fill a bottomless emotional void with material possessions. Shannon Wilsey's death ignited a firestorm of controversy and a bitter round of finger-pointing, forcing a difficult examination of the world she inhabited and the cultural forces that shaped her. The most immediate debate centered on blame. Was her death a tragic but inevitable consequence of her own choices? Or was she a victim of a predatory and exploitative industry? Representatives from the adult film world tended to frame it as the former. They highlighted her drug use, her unreliability, and her financial mismanagement as evidence of a pre-existing self-destructive streak. From this perspective, the industry was merely the stage upon which her personal drama played out. Her tragedy was her own making. Conversely, many of her friends, family, and outside critics laid the blame squarely at the feet of the industry. They argued that it was a system that profited from exploiting the insecurities of young women. They contended that the industry took Shannon, a vulnerable and insecure person, amplified her obsession with her appearance, paid her vast sums of money without providing any financial or psychological guidance, and then discarded her when she became difficult. In this view, she was a casualty of a system designed to chew up and spit out young talent. The truth is likely a complex and uncomfortable synthesis of both. Shannon was an adult who made choices, but she was a very young adult, operating in a high-pressure, unregulated environment with no safety net. Her story becomes a powerful case study in the murky ethics of industries that profit from the physical bodies of their employees without taking responsibility for their mental and emotional well-being. Beyond the industry itself, her life and death force a confrontation with the broader, more insidious cultural phenomenon known as the beauty myth. Shannon's story is an extreme but not entirely unfamiliar example of the intense pressure society places on women to conform to a narrow, often unattainable standard of beauty. Her belief that her worth was entirely contingent on her appearance is a belief shared, to a lesser degree, by millions of women. Her tragedy illustrates, in the most brutal terms, the potential psychological damage of this ideology. It begs the question, when a culture teaches a woman that her face is her fortune, what happens when she perceives that fortune to be lost? While Savannah was a colossal star within her specific sphere, her story has not entered the mainstream consciousness in the same way as those of Marilyn Monroe or Dana Plato. Yet, her life and death hold a unique and powerful significance as one of the most stark and undiluted cautionary tales of the modern celebrity era. She stands as a tragic archetype, the Icarus of image, a young woman who flew too close to the sun of a manufactured ideal and was destroyed when her waxen wings of perceived perfection began to melt. Her story is a powerful illustration of the profound disconnect between external adoration and internal desolation. It reveals how one can be an object of desire for millions and still feel utterly, completely alone. Her narrative is significant because it strips away the romanticism often associated with tragic starlets. There is nothing romantic about her end. It is a raw, painful, and deeply sad story about mental illness, addiction, and low self-worth, set against the backdrop of an industry that magnified those issues. She is a haunting reminder of the real human cost behind the fantasies we consume. By comparing her to Dana Plato, another young star who struggled with the transition from one kind of fame to another and died tragically, we see a pattern. Both were young women who were celebrated for a particular image at a young age and found themselves unable to cope when that image and the industry around it changed. Shannon's story, however, is arguably even more focused on the specific tyranny of beauty, making it a uniquely potent and heartbreaking lesson on the subject. In the final quiet analysis, the story of Savannah is the story of Shannon Wilsey, a girl from a perfect suburb who chased a Hollywood dream and found a nightmare dressed in glamour. She achieved a level of fame that most can only imagine, becoming a symbol of beauty and desire for an entire generation of fans. But the persona of Savannah, the confident goddess, was a fortress built to protect a deeply insecure and frightened young woman, and eventually, that fortress became her prison. She lived a life in which her reflection was her greatest asset and her most merciless judge. The ultimate devastating irony is that the very face she believed was her only claim to being loved became, in her own broken mind, the irrefutable proof that she was unlovable. Her story is a harrowing testament to the fact that self-worth cannot be found in the applause of strangers or the reflection in a mirror. It is a light that must be kindled within, a light that for Shannon tragically went out long before the dawn. That's a wrap for today's video. If you enjoyed it, smash that like button, drop us a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss our new content. Thanks for watching.